Here's Jim Telemonte in the AM 560 Traffic Center.
On the north side of Chicago, CTA Red Line trains on the 95th bound or southbound side are not stopping at Granville, Thorndale, or Bryn Mawr stations until August 14th for track and signal work. But northbound trains are stopping at those stations. Right now in northwest Indiana, looking at I-65 southbound near 61st Avenue, there's a crash in the right lane. 8094 westbound, the exit to Indianapolis Boulevard is closed until August 24th. Inbound Stevenson traffic's a little heavy approaching the Rhine, especially on the right side. The ramp to the inbound Rhine's heavy. Inbound Rhine traffic is stop and go from the Stevenson to Roosevelt. 17 minutes from 95th to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
More of Chicago's Morning Answer comes your way next. Now your official Chicagoland weather forecast. Mostly cloudy and cool with a thunderstorm in spots today. It'll be breezy this afternoon with a high temperature of 74. Partly cloudy tonight, dipping down to 61. Then tomorrow, it's going to be a very pleasant day weather-wise with intervals of clouds and sunshine. High temperature 74 degrees. It's currently 68 degrees. Your next news update in 30 minutes. Continuous coverage of the latest news, traffic, and weather at 560theanswer.com. I'm Elisa Z. Now more of Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by Papa Nicholas Coffee. Papa Nicholas Coffee, roasted fresh daily in Batavia, Illinois.
Sports and politics and sports and politics and sports and politics and intersection. Arrogance and ignorance, arrogance, ignorance, and arrogance and ignorance. Intersection.
Yeah, and Judd Garrett writing at his blog, Objectivity is the Objective. Mixing of sports and politics is potentially dangerous. Well, more so than just in terms of losing fans. He recalls the Munich Olympics where, the Palestinian terrorist group took 9 Israeli athletes, killing 2 of them, where sports is supposed to be a haven from geopolitics or even parochial politics.
It's supposed to be an escape, at least it used to be.
It's also should be protected as one of the last meritocracies in the Western world. But that's not what's happening, and he's written extensively about it. He has some background in this, too, as a former running back for the hated Dallas Cowboys, at least by me, because I'm a Steelers fan.
Oh, that's right.
Although I'm increasingly...
I used to live in El Paso, so I like Dallas.
I can't be a fan of any sports, including all the teams which for which I share season tickets in Chicago. It's a struggle, and the Blackhawks didn't make it any easier by participating in that ridiculous pregame ritual
spoken word
on Saturday afternoon where you had the Minnesota Wild defenseman, a man who is Filipino and German, come out in Black Lives Matter garb and preach about Black Lives Matter, and then kneel for the national anthem, U.S. national anthem, while everyone stood for the Canadian national anthem. Now, all the hockey players stood for both anthems.
Yeah.
Okay, fine. But you still have this guy kneeling before the national anthem. He's a Canadian national, plays for the Minnesota Wild, while standing for the Canadian national anthem. And what it conveyed to me is this position that is absolutely political and fact-free, that racist institutions in the past and racism today are uniquely American. Do you want to have a little discussion of Canadian history on the topic, or the history of the Western world on the topic? Frankly, the history of the world on the topic. Meanwhile, some of these same neo-Marxist ignoramuses are running cover for China, where the enterprises with whom they have contracts outside of their chosen sport, like Nike, are literally using slave labor today. So you're railing against racist institutions like slavery in this country from hundreds of years ago while you're running cover for Chinese communists and corporations that are in bed with them to use slave labor to produce shoes to ship over here? Help me suss that out.
It makes no sense.
Mike Pompeo was on with Maria Bartiromo over the weekend on Fox Business. And he talked specifically about that, about the sanctions they're imposing on Chinese companies, as well as the pressure they're putting on American companies to reevaluate their supply chains, particularly if they're involved in complicity with slave labor.
We've begun to impose sanctions on the individuals and businesses involved there. This most recent set of sanctions put out by the Department of Treasury will put the businesses operating there on notice. They've got to change their behavior. They've got to stop using slave labor. They've got to stop participating in these systems that have been connected to forced sterilizations, forced abortions. These are terrible, terrible things that are taking place there. And we're going to impose real costs on those businesses. This company is involved in the cotton trade and so has deep connectivity to Western businesses, including those in the United States. And we've been very clear. We've told U.S. businesses to take a real deep look into their supply chains. I don't think companies, some brand names here in America, want to be connected to what's taking place there.
I don't know. Somebody better put that question to Phil Knight. As well as the NBA, this ESPN story about the sports camps there and the abuse of players that is going on under the umbrella of the NBA, and the NBA playing Captain Ronald. Oh, my gosh, what's going on in China? Oh, that's terrible. We're going to have to look into that. For more on this, we're joined by the aforesaid Judd Garrett. Judd, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So what about Nike and Nike and the NBA in particular, and the cover they run for Chinese communists, per the Nike story out last week about using slave labor, and the ESPN of all outlets expose on those sports camps in China?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's extremely hypocritical. I mean, I go back to last November with Daryl Morey, the general manager of the Houston Rockets, when he aligned himself with the protest in Hong Kong, saying, "Free Hong Kong, I support what they're doing." And those are people who just want the basic human rights that we have in America. And he got smacked down by LeBron James and Steve Kerr and by the NBA for just tweeting something, "I stand with Hong Kong." And now, so LeBron James and the NBA are allowed to protest oppression in America, but the people in China who are oppressed 100 times worse than we've ever been charged of doing, they can't protest. Well, we're not allowed to align with that protest. And the only reason why they're doing that is because China, hundreds of millions of dollars are given to the NBA from China. So they're protecting their paycheck, and they're protecting that oppression that's going on, to enrich themselves. I mean, the hypocrisy is absolutely ridiculous.
Also, the NFL, since you were a former NFLer, Roger Goodell's 180 on Colin Kaepernick, on the kneeling, and then the owner's silence in response to that 180. At least Jerry Jones and maybe it was the Carolina Panthers owner as well, spoke out against kneeling and sort of that disrespect in that moment. Now nobody is saying anything except for Mike Ditka.
Yeah, again, I mean, I was with the Cowboys in 2016 when the whole kneeling started, and they took it in the bank account. There was a lot of NFL fans who turned the TV off, who weren't buying the merchandise, who weren't going to the games. I think there was a 15% drop in all that was going on in 2016. And that's why a lot of the owners were speaking out. And right now, it is a little puzzling why a lot of these owners who are very supportive of the national anthem and the American flag have not been speaking out. I mean, Ditka's a guy. I coached with Mike Ditka back in the late '90s at the Saints, so I know him fairly well. I mean, he's a guy that's going to speak his mind and say it like it is. I mean, he's a guy from Aliquippa, Pennsylvania. I mean, his dad was a coal miner. He's worked for everything he's gotten, and he believes in America, so he's going to stand up for America. And I think it's a shame that a lot of these other people who have benefited so greatly from America are so willing to disrespect our flag and disrespect the national anthem.
Yeah, and it's hard to watch the NBA. I mean, every player pretty much took a knee. Referees were taking a knee. Coaches, the water boy, the team manager. Magic's Jonathan Isaac did not. But they also are wearing these league-approved social justice messages on the backs of their jersey. And what does that say to you?
Well, to me, I think I think that's again very hypocritical because that's not free speech. When the NBA says you can only say these 29 messages, that's not free speech. That's the NBA controlling the message. This is what happens in totalitarian countries. No one's going to be able to put "Free Hong Kong" on the back of their jersey or a pro-life message on the back of their jersey. The NBA is controlling those messages, and again, that's under the guise of free speech. That's oppression under the guise of free speech, and the NBA players are not asking enough questions or not inquisitive enough to realize what's going on. And to me, it's pure propaganda because there's no push, the other side of the issue isn't being presented. It's just one message that's being thrown in our face without any pushback, without any counter messaging. So to me, it's just pure propaganda.
Yeah, it is. You're right to point out it's almost hilarious, and frankly, the ignorance is so deep there that they don't even appreciate. You're getting pre-approved messages from the man to put on the back of your jersey to show how much of a rebel you are, to show how much of an agent of change you are. I mean, you're being spoon-fed like an infant, and you're standing up for something. It really is something out of a dystopian novel. These individuals and when did we get coaches like Greg Popovich and Steve Kerr opining ignorantly and hypocritically? Steve Kerr got caught with his pants down too about China, just like the rest of the NBA back after Maury's tweet. Oh gosh, I didn't know about China so much. I've got a brother-in-law who's a scholar in Chinese studies. I'm learning more about China from him. Oh, really? You didn't know about the Chinese communists and repression? So then just shut up about everything because you apparently don't read anything. But coaches like Popovich and Steve Kerr and the coaches like Tom Landry or John Wooden, even our Bulls coach like Jerry they're just, where are these guys? And where are these guys not just to just stay in their lane, but also to tell guys like Popovich and John Kerr, why don't you just focus on basketball because you're embarrassing me in the league with your nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, and to me, that's what it comes down to. I mean, when you go to a game and you turn on the game, you want to see the game. You want to see two teams competing, playing hard, trying to win. You want to see that. That's what the game is all about. There's a purity to that. And when you keep injecting politics into it, it distorts the game. It destroys the game. People are walking away from the game. They're turning off the TV. They're not watching. And the other thing, if you're going to speak out politically, you better make sure that all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed because you're going to be exposed to your hypocrisy very easily as soon as when you become very outspoken. And like you said, Steve Kerr, Greg Popovich, LeBron James, all those guys, they're getting exposed for the hypocrisy.
I know not all these guys in the locker rooms are dum-dums, and they're not on board with this. I mean, Jonathan Isaac made this stand over the weekend for the Magic, which was and then had to defend himself to the press corps about whether or not, as a black guy, he thought Black Lives Matter. I mean, this is how silly it is. But he referenced his faith, and it was very thoughtful and very good. I maybe that's an example for others to follow, speaking out. But what do you sense, and from your contacts and your friendships, is happening in locker rooms across sport? Do you sense any sort of rebellion bubbling up that I don't want to be a part of this?
Well, I think it's becoming harder and harder to push back on this. I mean, you can see what happened to Drew Brees. I mean, a few months ago, Drew Brees stood up and said, I don't understand why anybody wouldn't stand up for the flag, and he got smacked down pretty quickly, and he changed his tune, very quickly. I think it's harder and harder to push back. And the example you brought up, I mean, the guy stands for the flag, and then he's the one that's being grilled by the media, not the ones that are out there disrespecting the United States and disrespecting the flag.
Well, so how does this redound to sports at the collegiate level, the high school level, the pre-high school level? I mean, do you see this as really threatening to poison sports?
I think it is. I mean, I think what happens at the higher levels does trickle down into college and high school and all that. I can recall back in 2016 when this was all going on that there were a number of high school players who were kneeling for the national anthem before their games. And to me, it's just like I've been saying, this is a lot of propaganda. There's a lot of hypocrisy that's going on, and all that it's doing, it's poisoning the sport. It's poisoning the purity of the sport, and it's driving people away.
And real quick, your gut feeling, do you think there will be an NFL season this year in college football? What do you think?
Well, I think the NFL and probably the Big Five conferences are really going to try to play. I mean, you have too much money to lose not to try to play. It's going to be strange because you got 53 guys in a locker room. If that virus hits, I mean, you could lose 20 to 25 players in an instant, and then suddenly you don't have a team. So they better have a contingency plan for those types of things happening. But they're going to try to play. They're going to do everything they can because they have too much money to lose.
Well, it's interesting because Major League Baseball had that with the Marlins and Rob Manfred, the one sports commissioner nobody knows exists, said there's no reason to cancel the season. It's just that these are workarounds, even if it's an illness that takes out a significant number of players, even if you have to reschedule some games, these are workarounds.
Yeah, and I think that's what they're going to have to do. I mean, I'm sure they've discussed it. I'm sure they have plans in place for those types of things happening.
Well, I'll tell you what, if these leagues continue on the track they're on, maybe the NFL won't have to worry about losing so much money because it'll already be built into what's going to happen with the flight of fans supporting. And it's not just, fans in the stands. It's not just the gate that they're going to lose. They're going to lose on the merchandising. They're going to lose, as you were mentioning, on people turning off their TV sets. I mean, I'm as diehard a sports fan as there is. And
I'm turned off the Blackhawks game, right?
After that national anthem fiasco, and I'm sort of done with it all. Unfortunately, you have to throw the people that are standing up, like Jonathan Isaac, and providing good examples in with all the bad examples. But I just don't want to be preached to by people who don't know what they're talking about. If I want to be preached to, I'm going to go to somebody who does know what they're talking about on Sundays. But I'm not going to listen to Greg Popovich and I think a lot of people are just done with that. It's going to be very sad for sports too. It makes life less interesting, unfortunately.
Yeah, I mean, you're absolutely right. I mean, that's a sentiment that I've heard from a lot of people that they're walking away from it. They're turning off the TV and they're done with it. And it's a shame because sports should be this great unifying thing, and it's become a very divisive thing. And that's the shame of the whole thing.
Judd Garrett, writer of the blog Objectivity is the Objective, former Dallas Cowboys running back and coach. Judd Garrett, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The more you listen, the more you'll know. This is Chicago's Morning Answer. On AM 560, The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. Consumer goods companies may be next to feel the China virus pain. Second quarter, very bad for big oil. Those stories next. You've all probably heard of asbestos and know that it's dangerous. And you may also know exposure to asbestos is the only known cause of mesothelioma, a deadly cancer. People who were exposed to asbestos decades ago are being diagnosed to this day with mesothelioma. That's because it can take as many as 30 or even 50 years to develop. But did you also know there's money to pay victims of asbestos exposure?